Millionaire Dr. Steve Kagan says he's running for Congress to pass No Patient Left Behind. What Dr. Millionaire doesn't want you to know is his clinic left more than 80 patients behind, suing them. That's right, suing more than 80 patients, leaving many in financial pain. Is this the work of a compassionate doctor? This is one doctor Wisconsin families can prevent from making house calls. Don't send Dr. Kagan to the House of Representatives. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising. Dr. Steve Kagan's television ad says he took legal action against 80 former patients. But here's what he won't tell us. He sued one couple for over $2,000, even though the family had 6 children, including a 3-year-old who they'd lost to an illness. The mother asked Dr. Kagan to submit his bill directly to the insurance company. He sued her instead. Dr. Millionaire Steve Kagan. One doctor we can prevent from making house calls. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Martin O'Malley's Baltimore. As mayor, O'Malley manages the most dangerous city in America, with a homicide rate 6 times higher than New York City's, and a school system that's in shambles with the lowest high school graduation rate in the state and the 2nd lowest in the nation. Baltimore, Martin O'Malley's legacy of mismanagement. And now he wants a promotion, so he can do for the entire state of Maryland what he did for Baltimore. Maryland can't afford that reckless approach. Claire McCaskill talking? Better be skeptical. McCaskill says she's on your side, but supports keeping the death tax that can force some to sell their small business or farm just to pay the taxes. She says she's committed to national security, but opposes a terrorist surveillance program. And now she brags about supporting ethanol in the legislature when she wasn't even there. Typical McCaskill. She just tells you what you want to hear. The National Republican Senatorial Committee is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
Attention all shoppers. Attention all shoppers. Starting today, prices are going up.
This could be coming to a store near you if Jack Davis has his way. Higher prices. Because Jack Davis wants tariffs on many of the products you buy. It would be like adding a tax on them. Higher prices may not matter to millionaire Jack Davis, but everyone else would feel the pain.
Attention all shoppers. Jack Davis is no bargain.
The Republican National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Before Jack Davis wanted your vote, he said what he really believes about the tax cuts. He didn't like them. But without these tax cuts, married couples would pay more taxes. So would families with children, even seniors. And Jack Davis wants higher taxes on Social Security. Higher taxes don't just cost us money, but jobs too. Jack Davis, higher taxes, fewer jobs. We can't trust Jack Davis in Congress. The Republican National Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising. Ken Lucas was caught handwriting a personal letter asking for leniency for a crooked banker in the Erpenbeck scandal. The impact of the scandal was more than $172 million. Hundreds of homebuyers ripped off, jobs lost. Did Ken Lucas help the victims? Nope. He wrote the judge to go easy on his crooked banker friend. Real people got hurt, and Ken Lucas just walked away. The National Republican Congressional Committee paid for it, is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Why is liberal Democrat Melissa Bean running a smear campaign against David McSweeney? Perhaps she doesn't want you to know that she follows liberal Nancy Pelosi 83% of the time. Bean even voted against allowing the military to help protect our borders against illegal immigrants and potential terrorists. That may be popular in Pelosi's San Francisco congressional district, but not in Illinois. Melissa Bean, just a Nancy Pelosi wannabe. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising. Our healthcare system is on life support, and guess who doesn't seem to care? Congresswoman Melissa Bean. Jackpot lawsuits have driven costs up and doctors out. When it came time to fix the system, how did she vote? No to limiting attorney's fees, no to a cap on damages, no to common sense malpractice reform. Her prescription for our ailing system, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Bean seems to think she knows best. It's time for a second opinion. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Leonard Boswell must believe he's better able to spend your money than you are. Boswell voted against making the tax cuts permanent. tax cuts for working families and small businesses. He's voted against education savings accounts that give tax incentives to families to pay for college. No wonder a nonpartisan taxpayer group has given him a failing grade. Congressman Leonard Boswell. Just call him the tax man. The Economic Freedom Fund is responsible for the content of this message.
When Sheriff Brad Ellsworth's department mistakenly released a suspected child rapist from jail, Brad Ellsworth was in Washington, campaigning for Congress. He said it wouldn't have mattered even if he were in the next room. But the plot thickens. Just last year, in another case, an inmate convicted of robbery walked away from Ellsworth's safe house and murdered 3 people. Brad Ellsworth, a disturbing pattern. The National Republican Congressional Committee is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Democrat Nancy Boydas says she'll roll back the tax cuts. If that happens, Kansas taxpayers would be in a lot of hurt. The marriage penalty would return, child tax credits would drop, the death tax would come back to life, forcing some families to sell their farm or business. Nancy Boyda would cost families with children over $2,000 more in taxes. Had enough? The National Republican Congressional Committee paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising.
I'm Chris Chicola, and I approve this message.
Chris Chicola's former company paid property taxes late once. They took responsibility. Joe Donnelly chose not to pay his personal property taxes 15 times. Donnelly refuses to take responsibility. The News-Dispatch says it's disturbing that Donnelly isn't more forthcoming about his taxes. The reason? Donnelly had the money, but spent $250,000 on his campaign. It's not about Joe Donnelly's taxes, it's about his character.
News reports say federal prosecutors have opened an investigation of Alan Mollahan's finances, and that Mollahan used his seat in Congress to send $250 million to organizations he helped set up. Over the last decade, their employees and contractors gave Mollahan almost $400,000 for his campaign. And on issues we care about, Mollahan voted against the Medicare prescription drug bill and against Amber Alert. Confused, angered, betrayed? Stick around, there's much more.
Lois Murphy has a dirty little secret. It's her views on taxes. Liberal Lois said she'd roll back the tax cuts, not make them permanent. Taxpayers would feel the pain, married couples would pay more, families with children more, even seniors. Maybe Liberal Lois doesn't want you to know her dirty little secret. Doesn't want you to know that taxes will go up. Well, it's not a secret anymore. The National Republican Congressional Committee paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising.
In Georgia, Jim Marshall sounds more like Zell Miller. But in Washington, in Congress, he votes more like liberals Cynthia McKinney and Nancy Pelosi. Take the death tax. Jim Marshall voted to keep it repeatedly. Some say it could force the sale of a family farm or small business just to pay the tax. Marshall talks the conservative talk in Georgia, but walks the liberal walk in Washington. The Economic Freedom Fund is responsible for the content of this message.